my gratitude and thanks to Center for Indian Knowledge Systems. Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, whenever you're saying he's from JNU, I'm feeling little, it is embarrassing because I think that I'm with Assam University only, and that is, I'm part of Assam University, and even I'm on leave, so, and I am part of organizing committee. So,
JNU is an extended university, sir.
that's
Your primary university is Assam University.
Assam University is my, so that's how it is. And again, it's, we should appreciate Dr. Munmoon for putting in place such a wonderful workshop. Around 80 people have joined by now, and many more will join. I know many of them will join. So if you are really, if you are in this area, you would know, looking at these names, if you see the next 6 days, including this day, it is a star lineup, as I say, look at the names. You have who is who in this field of consciousness studies. It's not easy getting all of them on board in one workshop. So almost 6 months of hard work went in by Dr. Munmoon. These days, Nanglain is helping her. And presently, Dr. Ganga Bhushan is a director and of IKS Center. It's these names, we have got some very good professors of physics, who will be speaking on quantum physics, metaphysics interface. They're into consciousness studies for a pretty long time, for a couple of decades. I know them very long time. My good old friend Professor David Sharp is an out and out physicist who teaches at Maharishi University of Management, Ohio. Now it's in Fairfield, Ohio. He's a teacher of physics, but he is into that Maharshi's model of consciousness studies, and is very good at philosophy as well. And president of this university is Professor John Hegelin. I have heard a couple of times. John Hegelin is an international reputed scholar of particle physics. Getting time from John Hegelin is not an easy thing. People were standing for a couple of hours to listen to his lecture in the US when we all attended. We didn't get a seat there. We were standing for an hour listening to his talk. Again, works with the CERN Geneva Institute. Particle physics, he is into particle physics and speaks. These are excellent names, I'm not leaving any name by pointing a couple of names. Swami Medhananda joined us last workshop. Extremely brilliant scholar from Ramakrishna Mission, from New York or California. I don't know, but he is in the US, based in the US. And a galaxy of professors from Indian universities. Professor R.C. Pradhan, Hyderabad Central University, Professor R.P. Singh, JNU. And then you have our own Professor Raghunath Da from North Bengal. Professor Milan from Manipur. It's good to listen to all of them. And then we have Dr. Abhijit Bishwas, Bindu Kuti, and Alex Watson, our own professor from Ashoka University. So, this is a star-studded lineup. Let's, tighten the seat belts and listen to them for one complete week. It's good to listen to all of them and bringing various perspectives from quantum physics and metaphysics interface to consciousness studies in Buddhism, consciousness nature and its structure from Kashmiri Shaivism and Vedanta, of course. Upanishads and Vedanta is invariably there. It's and then modern European approaches to consciousness studies. This is some hell of a study for 1 week. When I'm pretty eager to listen to many of them and be part of this workshop. Now, coming back to some of the ideas, I will, some of the problems and ideas in consciousness studies that I wanted to share with you. I would like to share the PPT. Would you allow me? Yeah, please allow me to. Where is the share screen? Oh, no. No, you're able to see the slides? No.
No, sir. But something has come. I mean, you have shared something from mobile.
No.
You can share your PPT, sir. Otherwise,
There is
either to Dr. Manmohan or to me.
No. What happened was both got logged in, it seems. Yes. Both cell phone and this thing got logged in, so there is confusion. Yeah. Now it should be all right. Now share screen, desktop. Now again. There's some problem. We have to go to the share screen, isn't it? And then I have opened the PPT.
Yes, sir. Yes.
You say, sir, share entire window. Then only it will come.
Okay.
You share entire window.
Yeah. Microsoft PowerPoint. No, there is some.
You share it to any of us, sir. We will show. By WhatsApp you can share.
Can you check Moon? I have shared with you, and again I'm trying again. I have shared and
Yeah, sir. Let me see.
yeah, I have shared it with you, and then again I'm trying to open, and then let me again try also. Yeah, you can see. Did you see the PPT?
Uh,
You can see now. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes,
yes,
yes.
sir.
Now
Yes,
it is.
sir.
Now
Yes,
I
sir.
can. Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Good. That's why philosophy people don't like the modern thing, technologies. They just want to talk, and when they want to do this is what happens. Okay, let's get to things. So, Indian Knowledge Systems Center has a mandate to look at the glorious past of India. Somehow, the creative genius of this particular land, which expressed itself in astronomy, in mathematics, in medicine, in yoga, in metallurgy, law, and many other disciplines, is the creative genius is not seen in these areas, and in between there has been the foreign rule, and with that the result, there is somehow the missing link between the knowledge systems that we used to have and the kind of innovative, creative ideas that we expressed in all these areas. It could be metallurgy, it could be astronomy, it could be mathematics, Vedic mathematics. That there is a missing link is what makes people sit and ponder over what has happened to this creative genius, which expressed the Vedic knowledge, which expressed otherwise, which had brilliance in the fields of law, in terms of understanding polity and economy. There were minds which were creatively expressing. But what has happened to it is, in the Middle Ages, somehow there is that dullness that has crept into. We don't go into those reasons, but then we understand that there is that missing link between the glorious past and the present condition. What are the reasons? Historical, we are not into that. So Indian knowledge systems is centers across India are meant to revisit all those knowledge areas, and then see how we can revive them or gain inspiration from them, not to live in the past glory, but how to be inspired by such creative geniuses that they were, and then carry forward the work from there. Europeanization of the earth is what is contested by this idea of Indian knowledge systems. Europeanization of the earth in terms of ideas and ideals need to be understood carefully. If you Europeanize the earth and then accept ideas without comparison from your own cultural backgrounds, when an idea creeps up from a cross-cultural context, one has to be careful in comparing and contrasting with an available idea within a life system, because ideas nourish the soul of a community, of a culture, and of a nation. Certain ideas have been nourishing the soul of this nation. And when we want to replace with some other ideas from different alien cultures, we have to be careful, that's all. It's not that we are not open to ideas, but then we have to be careful in comparing them before we accept a certain other idea. That is where the overarching reach of universalism gets questioned. You have African philosophies, you have Chinese philosophy, you have Asian philosophies, you have philosophical trends in several cultural contexts. So, but then what has happened is, by saying philosophy is philosophy, we have reduced it as philosophy is European philosophy. Or in another sense, even in social sciences equally, in understanding the whole order of a society, in understanding the economic model of the societies, a sociological understanding of the society, or is whether it is anthropology, the dominant Marxian, Weberian models have dominated our understandings. There are understandings which are actually native to the community. The native thinking is what is upheld by Indian knowledge system. So we cannot be blind to the native thinking models or indigenous models of knowledge. I'll give a couple of examples as to what happens when we don't take care of one's own thinking. If you, the Europeans are Europeans per se, and if you allow the Europeanization of the earth, what would happen is, they would reduce the whole world into military zones, as they have done now, and there will be war zones in different parts of the world. This is what is their contribution in the last few hundred years. And wherever they have left an impression of, a conflict which will rage for at least 100 years. It could be a Kashmir scenario, it could be a Palestine-Israel scenario, or it could be other areas. Therefore, there is a necessity that we hold on to other models of thinking rather than the sweeping, hold that the European minds have got. And with due respect to the brilliance that they bring, and also with a footnote that we are not close to any thinking which comes from cross-cultural contexts. That's what the whole idea that drives the IKS centers, Indian Knowledge System centers, how the native thinking actually can intervene in terms of understanding, in terms of doing a sociological study, an anthropological, or is it an economic model? How Sarvodaya could really help us. Sarvodaya ethics could help us in terms of understanding, welfare economics, etc., etc. That's how it is. For example, in philosophy, what happens if we don't compare, for example, psyche in Greek tradition, that has a Greek understandings, where from you have this whole beginnings of the mind-body problem in European tradition. I'm told psyche, it stands for soul, it stands for mind, it stands for spirit. The psyche stood for, so body-mind problem, has its origins in this understanding. And what the native thinking has done in India, if we go back to 3000 years BC as Rigveda times, I consider 3000 instead of a 1200 BC, so another 2000, 5000 years. Whether it is Yoga's school of philosophy, or Sankhya school of philosophy, or Vedanta school of philosophy, the distinction has been very clear. Sankhya and Yoga both have separated consciousness from everything else. Consciousness itself is put into a distinct category, and then you have everything else into another category. Everything else is matter for them. Whether you call this brain, you call mind, you call mahat, you call ahankara, you call chitta, the memory tape. Everything else is put into the physical category of pradhana. Even Sankhya does that, and they were very careful about this division, and then they have given a separate status for consciousness from time immemorial. Of course, Vedanta obviously does that when it divides chit and achit. Chitta chit vishishta, the chit, the souls, and achit, the matter. In Ramanuja's philosophy, in Advaita philosophy as well, there's a clear distinction. So consciousness was never mingled up anything that has got to do with the psyche, anything that has got to do with mind, anything that has got to do with brain functions. I mean, that's an enormous difference one has to take note of. And if one is not rooted to the native thinking, what would happen is one would easily take up a Greek idea or a European idea and fall into, into the difficulty of understanding the whole field of consciousness. That's a major division that one can understand. And one can give a number of such places, where the understandings differ. So one has to be careful in comparing the ideas when one is dealing with the different cultural contexts. And you know this famous Gadamer's discussions following Heidegger, who said that, are there consciousness studies apart from Europe? They thought that they're making consciousness studies for the first time. When we can forgive them, sometimes the kshama is good, and we need not fight with them. But such is the, the kind of understanding that people have got. So Heidegger had the same understanding that, because that is specific to a European culture. One has to understand what is specific to European culture. Intentional thesis was specific to European culture. It was for the first time they were listening to someone like Husserl coming up with some new ideas. It was pretty new for them. It was a phenomenal jump in the understanding within the context of a European culture. But Chitta and Vritti is not new to an Indian culture. You can go back 2000 years to actually, look at those ideas, a reflection of those ideas. So one has to be careful about being rooted to a tradition, rooted to a particular thinking processes, and pick up the ideas from the native forms of thinkings, symbols, the ideas which nourish the soul of a community, nourish the soul of a nation. One has to be very careful about them when we jump into cross-cultural studies. And next then big question will be, is there an Indian mind when you talk about Indian knowledge systems? What is it to be called as having an Indian mind? What is it that you say? How is it special? We speak about universalization of knowledge. That's an aspect that we all aim for. Then what is it when you say an Indian mind? Very interesting. Each of us can think over as to what is it to be called as an Indian mind when we do political science, when we do economy, or when we do social sciences, when we do philosophy. What is it that you call something as an Indian mind? So, to be rooted to a tradition, again, in the same context, to be rooted to a tradition doesn't mean you want to segregate knowledge into watertight compartments, number one. Also doesn't mean it's a geographic location. You want to limit knowledge to a particular geographic location, a particular community, a particular cultural context. That's not the idea. When we say Indian mind, it doesn't mean you are working for the sake of a particular geographic location. That also we have to be careful. End of the day, when we think and we do what we do philosophy, and we do philosophy for the whole world. We don't do it just for an Indian subcontinent or a Chinese or an African subcontinent. We do it for the whole world. And then also a recognition of the forms of life or our thinking models which nourish the life across the globe. Indian thinking nourishes life. As I have given you the examples, and you leave it to the British mind, and they will create a conflict which will run for a minimum 100 years. Where they left Kashmir and India, it runs 100 years of conflict. Or they left Palestine and Jerusalem areas, it runs a 100-year conflict. So you leave it to a European mind and be careful what would happen. And therefore, the necessity that we look for different forms of thinking from different contexts and be careful about what are those ideas which nourish societies, which nourish the cultures. So this overarching universalism is what gets questioned when we talk about Indian mind or when we talk about Indian knowledge. Universalism as Europeanism is what is contested. And I'm told this is done specifically in postmodernism. Postmodernist thinkers also, there are, there are several such thinkers who have questioned the whole ideals of modernity, modernism as well. The European scientific revolutions and thereby their understandings of modernism. In Indian philosophical context, we have not accepted the definition of modernity. So the question of postmodernity doesn't come in. The Hegelian definitions of modernity were not acceptable. So forget about discussions in terms of a postmodernity. But this is how we were doing philosophy in terms of schools. In terms of being rooted to a particular school, philosophical enterprise was done in India. And by belonging to a school, individualism was lost there. They were making thinking individuals, the whole idea of creating thinking individuals within a school. And as you belong to the school, what Indians would do is they go back to their teachers, they take up the text, they write commentaries, they write sub-commentaries, they write footnotes, they carry a tradition forward. So instead of the individualism of a Europe versus belonging to a Darshana school within the Indian context. In Indian context, you are not an independent thinker, one individual thinker coming up with an idea of a panpsychism, epiphenomenalism, and then, no, you belong to a particular school which has a minimum of 3,000 to 4,000 year old. And then you carry forward the thinking. You carry forward the thinking not as an individual, but belonging to a particular tradition. The terminology, the concepts, the theories, there are non-translatable terminologies, non-translatable theoretical understandings. One example I would give you is this is what is being rooted to tradition will teach all of us. One example would be, say, for example, you take the word of Ishvara. Ishvara is not the god of the Semitic religions. If you understand God as Ishvara, we are making a mistake. If you understand Durga as goddess, you are making a mistake. If there is the whole idea of Devata, Deva. There is the idea of Bhagashabda, Bhagavan. There is the idea of Atman. There is the idea of Paramatman. There is an idea of Nirguna Brahman. None of them can be translated as God, the non-translatables that they are. This is what exactly I mean by being rooted to a tradition, is to understand, there are different, concepts. Each of them have got their own layered meanings. And all this, if you translate Brahman as God or Devata as a God, and then you translate Paramatman as a God, you have done injustice to a Ramanuja tradition, to a Shankara tradition, and to a Vedanta tradition. That is where one has to be, one gets to understand what it is to be rooted to a particular school of thought, the terminologies, the concepts, the theorizing, which is internal to a particular school, needs to be upheld, needs to be understood in that particular context. And thereby we bring actually, we bring diversity to universal thinking. We are not contesting ideas we bring so much diversity. The homogeneity gets contested. Homogenization is Europeanization, understand it that way. By that, what we mean is the Chinese philosophy is lost, African philosophy is lost, indigenous tribal philosophy is lost. They all lose their meaning. A Greek, if you go by the Greek definition of philosophy, you can't have indigenous tribal philosophies. And some of the schools of Indian philosophy cannot be categorized as philosophy, the philosophy or tradition of the Greeks, and therefore the necessity to be, rooted to traditions is what it all, I was trying to say. Now let's get back to, I'll throw up some of these ideas since it happens to be a keynote, and then let's see the next week there will be, discussions, as I said, from diverse fields. I will raise some of the questions and leave. We will then wait for Sthaneshwar Timalsina to take over. Now, you can see investigating consciousness. Munmoon made an excellent, opening remarks. The Lakshana of Brahman, the Lakshana of consciousness is the most difficult part of it. Lakshana is to define. How do you give a Lakshana of Brahman or consciousness? Chit was itself is a big question, and apart from reducing it to the one or the other, either you reduce the whole discussion to physicalism, or you bring it back to entire discussions into a belief in consciousness as the very ground of our cognition, our experiences. Either way, or several other approaches that we have. You have the electrochemical reactions of the neurons and the brain cells. They are doing some wonderful research. Take it from me, excellent research in the area of biological sciences. And then the quantum approach to consciousness studies. Physics people, excellent works. That's another way of doing. And you have European professors, still that is naturalism, that's part of naturalism, the whole enterprise of understanding consciousness, what it is to have an experience, etc., etc. And some of the Indian schools, if you look at the first proof, or psychological proof from Indian schools, not just Vedanta, you have the Nyaya having its own arguments. Then you have Sankhya, you have the Mimamsa. The psychological proof is the one is to be investigated. Consciousness to be investigated is known or unknown. I have repeated it earlier also. If it is known, we need not investigate it. Do we know consciousness at all? That's a question. Do we know or we do not know? If we know, we need not investigate it. If it is unknown, we cannot investigate it. This is Bhamatikara Vachaspati's language, please. Don't think I have made that line. It's Bhamatikara Vachaspati's commentary when Shankara raised this Purvapaksha on understanding consciousness, because Brahma Sutra starts with Adhato Brahma Jignasa. Let us try and investigate into the nature of consciousness, Brahman. The discussion continues, very interesting discussion continues. From the etymology of Brihadhatu, the words eternal, pure, or reached. Existence is what is demonstrated by the fact that it is the self of all. Actually, what the discussion is trying to say is that we all know the existence of our own self. By self, let us understand I exist, isn't it? We may doubt the independent nature of external objects outside. We may doubt mind-independent external reality. We may doubt, like hallucination. Maybe we are open dreaming that a workshop is happening. It may be a dream, a collective dream. We are all dreaming that this is happening. In the dreams also, a lion comes, it kills. And when we wake up, it is not there. Maybe this is a collective dream. We may doubt everything, but what we do not is that I exist is not doubted. I exist. This existence as the self, if you take it as the self itself is to be known as Brahman or consciousness. Everyone assumes the existence of himself because one cannot say, I am not. This is Shankara's language. One cannot, I'm not referring to a Descartes and then, again, this is pretty old tradition. One cannot say I am not. In that case, even the doubting self exists. So this is a psychological proof that existence has consciousness. The existence itself is consciousness. The separation I will discuss after a couple of slides, whether this existence as a self has consciousness as an attribute, or is it the very essential nature? Is this existence made up of the consciousness at all? Is a further discussion in the Vedanta schools. As self, if it is known as our own self, in the sense our own existence. Let us understand it as our own existence. This is a non-dubitable fact that we all talk about. Then also, why investigate? What is the point of this project of investigation when we know it was already as our own self? What makes us interested is because of the confusion created by wrong interpretations. Wrong interpretation by the scientific community in understanding consciousness, wrong interpretation by the neurobiologists, wrong interpretations by the naturalists. Therefore, there is a necessity that we understand what consciousness is. See, one thing, footnote, one thing what we all are very convinced, and everybody, all of us agree, science is yet to explain consciousness. Do we agree or not? All of us agree, I believe. We are yet to explain consciousness, whether it is quantum physics, neurobiology, they are yet to explain. Till they explain consciousness, the Vedantins will survive, the Buddhists will survive. When the moment they explain consciousness, we will stop taking our classes. This is what I usually say. The day you explain consciousness 100%, we will stop our jobs. We will leave our, the work that we are so confident that you will not be able to explain it out. What is it? The test that these days that I talk about is replicating test. What do you mean by replicating test? What we challenge the scientists is to replicate is, the other day I was showing an iPhone in the classroom, and I said, Apple company can replicate the other iPhone, isn't it? If it is 15 or 16, it can produce n number of iPhone 15s only because it has 100% knowledge of an iPhone. Isn't that the case? They know exactly the hardware and the software of creating iPhone 15. They can replicate. The question is, we can't replicate consciousness, which is observer independent. We are not talking about observer relative. The observer relative is different. All artificial intelligence is observer relative. It's pretty much relative. Observer independent is I am. You exist in the absence of the world. I exist in the absence of the entire world. Isn't that the case? A computer doesn't exist if you are not there. A computer needs somebody for its existence to be known. The world needs you to be revealed and to be known. In the absence of this I, the cognizer, this whole world makes no meaning at all. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. We bring meaning to this entire world and its existence. And therefore, as long as we can't replicate consciousness, it goes to show that we have not understood consciousness 100%. We have not understood. When we understand, we will replicate it. The moment we understand, till these scientists understand, let us stick to the age-old understanding of this consciousness, which is based on anubhava. Reason and anubhava are the two facets of doing darshana philosophy, particularly the Vedanta school. It did not rest upon reason alone, but it rested upon anubhava as well. Consciousness as subjective, objective, that dichotomy was not acceptable to the Vedanta. This is again a European contribution to our thinking. The subjective, everything is divided, the dichotomy is brought, mind-body problem, consciousness, subjective, objective, they bring in a dichotomy. When consciousness is spoken about, this anubhava transcends the subject-object dichotomy. It is not within this dichotomy. Again, the moment you say it is a subjective experience, already you are committing that there is an objective existence possible. Isn't that the case? Consciousness, it transcends the dichotomy of being subjective or objective. Therefore, it remains an anubhava, which can be repeated. So what we said is our investigation is interested and is based upon the anubhava which is passed on by the apta, by the reliable people. The anubhava of the reliable people went by the name Shabda Pramana as a Shravana, non-contradictory reflection as Manana, non-contradictory to this anubhava, a reflection as Manana. This tradition continued. And as I said, there have been there is a very strong methodologies that they have in approaching consciousness. And this approach to consciousness is not, a logico-philosophical model. This is not this model which is within thinking. Within thinking is again naturalism. We bring everything into logical propositions, arguments, argument 1, argument 2, therefore the conclusion. Approach to consciousness is not within thinking. It goes beyond, though it's not against thinking or against reason. So the first proof we discussed was in terms of psychological proof. Let's get into physio-theological proof, proof number 2. As I said, we are very confident till the date these scientists will come up and replicate consciousness, isn't it? Our workshops will all have meaning till the science proves, beyond a doubt, till the science explains. Professor R.C. Pradhan would speak on these lines. I believe that, we are yet to have an explanation. But what was achieved was, was an anubhava by the Vedantic method. You all know, all those who do Vedanta philosophy know the Panchakosha Vichara, Avasthatre Vichara, Anvaya Vyatireki model of reasoning, and then reflective meditation, Nididhyasana, which is different from dhyana mechanism. They had robust methodologies of approaching consciousness, understanding Chaitanya. Even saying consciousness, I feel a little uneasy. It's good to use the word Chaitanya because it has its own meanings attached to it. The second proof that one could think about is in the world, no non-intelligent object without being guided by intelligence comes forth from itself. Products that serve human aims, houses, palaces, or pleasurable gardens. We have such an argument in Brahmasutra. We have Jayanta Bhatta. We have Prashastapada's commentaries to say that material objects need some intelligence, to make them become useful in terms of their use to us as humans, which is a physical example. In our everyday life we know that how this intelligent arrangement proceeded from the non-intelligent pradhana. Here is where the Sankhya questions our understanding of consciousness. The Sankhyites have a question that, look, the products of the world, starting from Mahat Ahankara, Tanmatras, Mahabhutas, Gnanendriyas and Karmendriyas, the whole gamut of 24 products of the Pradhana are built with the 3 qualities. They are either pleasurable, they are either indolent, lazy, or they are active. Isn't that the case? They are built in with Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, all the products of this entire world. And therefore, you have to derive a primordial cause which contains the 3 gunas. How are you positing a Brahman who is beyond the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas? You are positing consciousness. If you posit a Nirguna Brahman, you have a cause which doesn't contain these qualities. So Sankhyites say that it must be material atoms, material prakriti, which must be the basis of the world expression. It must be materialistic. From matter the world objects have come, the matter from matter, material things have come, because material things exhibit either action, activity, or brightness or indolence, which in philosophical terms, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And therefore, you have pradhana as the main first cause. You can't posit a pure consciousness. Sankhya puts a Purvapaksha there. Cause and effect must have same nature. The world of objects shows sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the root cause is pradhana, which contains gunas and not Brahman. Spirit cannot produce matter. That's a strong defense from the Sankhya. You know, consciousness cannot produce matter. Matter produces matter. So therefore, you have to derive primary cause as pradhana. 2-1 Brahma Sutra, Rachana Anupapatescha Anumanam. That's a sutra where the discussion continues. Wood, etc. is not, this is Ramanuja's commentary on the sutra. Wood, etc. is not capable of producing chariots, palaces, without the help of an intelligent being. See, an intelligent being as somebody who is propelling non-intelligent Prakriti is what is the thesis arrived at. So a potter guides the clay into different shapes. And therefore, you need an intelligent being who shapes. Even when Sankhya gives the example, Pangvanthavat ubhayorapitam samyogastat krita sargaha, like a blind man and lame man, both Purusha and Prakriti cooperate when it comes to the creation of world of objects. The criticism against such a thesis of the Sankhya is when you say blind man and a lame man, both are intelligent and they can cooperate. Matter and consciousness both are not intelligent. Matter is not intelligent enough. So the example falls flat. So therefore, this argument is there across the schools of Indian philosophy, that intelligence guides material particles. If you go for the cosmological proof, we have another proof in terms of a cosmological proof. Dr. Munmoon, I still have some time.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. For your information, I started now. My slides just started.
Yes, sir. Please. Yeah.
So, okay. Once the professor joins, you just let me know, and then we will hand over.
Oh yeah, sure, sir.
Once he joins, we will. Let's look at another way of arguing. I mean, I'm just throwing some of the ideas, which modern discussions also have got, into European discussions. I will come in a later slide into what is panpsychism, epiphenomenalism, hard problems that already Dr. Munmoon mentioned. But my way of philosophizing is always, I'm rooted to this tradition, and then I do. I'm within the Vedanta tradition, and then I look at all these different theories that I come across. But my response is a response of a Vedantin to anything that I come across. This is how Brahma Sutra 239, a cosmological proof. Look at this. For ether and wind, I believe I'm making sense. I'm not, in any way. I believe it's okay. My going is okay, Dr. Munmoon. We're doing well.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This is one more way of arguing, one more proof mechanism that intelligence. By now we all understand that the whole discussions in Vedanta tradition 5,000 years is it is intelligence which is the ground of our cognition. Intelligence is the ground of our experience. We give meanings to what we come across. We give meanings to the objects. We give meanings to our own experiences, and it is the ground of our own existence. Vedanta again. Vedanta does not try to prioritize between essence and existence, for God's sake. Again, that's a European dichotomy is a European mind's speciality. I generally say they are gifted with dichotomy. Everywhere they want to look for. There is no integrated approach to knowledge. Whether it is, even if you talk about syllogism, there is again, they say inductive and deductive reasoning, formal and material. Whereas the Nyaya syllogism is at a time an integrated approach. It is at a time, the Panchavaya Vakya is inductive and deductive. It is both formal and material. That's why I said the British mind is gifted with dichotomy in division. How do you look at polarities are brought in by their thinking? And here it is also the same case. Ether and wind, on the contrary, have origin and not Brahman. Ether has origin and wind has origin. So from modifications, other modifications arise. There is no necessity for Brahman also to be a modification. It will lead to regress, or what is called as a fallacy, anavastha. We're talking that everything in the world that we come across is, grounded on intelligence. So the distinction of essence and existence is not a problematic area for Vedantins. Vedantins neither prioritize existence nor are prioritizing essence. Existence precedes essence. That's not a statement for a Vedantin. We have an integrated approach to it. Our existence is primary and important for us, but we want each individual to understand the ground on which this existence is led upon. In the absence of this understanding of the ground, the way you approach to everyday life world, our response to suffering, our response to sorrow, our response to happiness, our responses to war and peace, and our every response will be different when we understand this intelligence is the ground of this existence. So again, the dichotomy is our European contribution. The dichotomy that, essence is important. Are you an essentialist? Vedantin would laugh at you. What kind of a question are you saying? I'm neither an essentialist nor an existentialist. I'm bothered about what is out there. I'm bothered about what is a fact that is out there, existing out there. So our existence, which has the ground, which is grounded in essence, it's again an integrated approach to understanding life. Much more advanced than dividing it into essence and existence dichotomy. This is the advantage of being rooted to a tradition. That's what I keep bringing to all of you, since this is Indian Knowledge System Center's work. This is what makes a difference when one is rooted to a tradition, then looks at the cross-cultural context. One is not swept by the currents of thought from cross-cultural context. One is grounded and the feet is very firm. We allow the wind to blow, but the feet is very firm, is grounded. That groundedness is a product of understanding. What is it that we call as Indian mind? So the modifications is what we see when it comes to ether and wind, not consciousness, because if you again talk about a modification of consciousness, it will lead to regress ad infinitum, anavastha. No, again, the argument continues. No origin of the existent on account of impossibility. You don't speak about origin of an existent. Intelligence or consciousness is what is existence all about. It is existence. Then again, if you raise a question, what is the origin of existence? That's pretty contradictory and illogical. You can't ask about the origin of an existent. It is existent. Brahman is pure being. It couldn't have sprung from another pure being. So by Brahman or Atman, in Linga Purana, there is a definition of Atman. If you, Shankara quotes this Linga Purana. Shankara didn't give his definition there. He quotes the Linga Purana and then says apadhatu and anadhatu. There are two root words from which Atman is understood. By that, what we mean is expansion of consciousness as apa, vyapakatva. Vishnu, by the word Vishnu, we mean vyapakatva, expanded consciousness. Don't bother Vishnu with all the four hands and Shankha Chakra. That is all right. But by that term, Vyapakatva is expansion of consciousness. And in Anadhatu Aro Atman also, you have several meanings attached to it as the ground of cognition, as the ground of experience. Brahman is pure being. It couldn't have sprung from another pure being. One more argument. A pure being doesn't come out but another pure being. You have an argument on the same lines. If you understand consciousness as perfect being, it cannot originate from another perfect being. Isn't that the case? Because already this is a perfect being. And it cannot come out from an imperfect being, because that is not thinkable. A perfect being doesn't come out from an imperfect being, and a perfect being doesn't come out from another perfect being. And therefore, not from differentiated being, from homogeneity, differences arise and not otherwise. Differences come from homogeneity. If you have singular pure consciousness, then you can discuss about differences in the world objects, whether it is Mahat, Ahankara, mind, intellect, organs, or the world of objects. From homogeneity, we can talk about heterogeneous objects. We can't discuss it the other way around. From heterogeneous things, the homogeneity of consciousness will not arise. Therefore, consciousness has the primacy than matter. That's a discussion. Vessels come out from the clay and not from the non-being, and therefore pure consciousness has no producer. The word Shuddha Chaitanya gets contested in Acharya Ramanuja's philosophy in Vedartha Sangraha and Sri Bhashya. Conscious Atman is taken as the I principle is withheld in Ramanuja's philosophy. The I has consciousness as an essential nature of the I is consciousness. In Shankara, consciousness and I are not different from each other. The I is consciousness, the I is knowledge, the I is existence. Sat, Chit, and Ananda there is no I is not distinct from that. It is like, onion example we give in the classroom. And there are only layers to an onion. Inside the onion, there is nothing called an onion. Once you remove those layers, there is nothing called onion. There are only layers. And this existence has a Nama, Rupa, Vedana, Samskara, and Vijnana. These are the layers of this existence. And if it is Vedanta, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya, the body subject, the mind subject, the prana as the subject, Vijnana as the subject. If you remove all that, there is nothing called an I. And everything is constituted of consciousness, and the ground is consciousness. Ramanuja contests this position of Shankara. For him, there is an I which is eternally. All of us have eternal existence as individual selves. We are existing as individual selves for eternity. And because of Anadi Avidya Vasanaya, Anadi Avidya, because of eternal ignorance, we keep performing human actions, our karma, and our karma is responsible for the state of affairs. God has nothing to do with our own state of affairs. He doesn't interfere with our state of affairs. It is our own human actions, our own thinking, our decisions, which are responsible for our own conditions. And therefore, Anadi Karma and Anadi Avidya are responsible for the journey of the individual. The individual I has consciousness as an essential nature. And again, consciousness is an attribute, number one. Number two, knowledge is an essential nature of the I, and knowledge is an attribute. There it is called as, Dharma Bhuta Jnana. And the relation of this individual I to Ishvara, or what is called as, Paramatman, is Aprutak Siddhi. Aprutak Siddhi, inseparable relation. We all make up the very body of universal consciousness. All these individual selves make up the very body. We are the modes of that universal consciousness. Is an explanation which we get, so that there the I gets retained. The I is the individual self, and the I is not a product of ignorance. Is not a product of adhyasa. If you read the Adhyasa Bhashya, I is a product of superimposition of Asmat Pratyaya and Yushmat Pratyaya. The I is a product of superimposition. In Shankara Bhashya, But whereas for Acharya Ramanuja, the I has its existence. The I has consciousness as its essential nature, knowledge as its essential nature. That's where Acharya Ramanuja contests in the Sri Bhasha on the first sutra and also in Vedartha Sangraha, followed by Sudarshana Suri and Vedanta Deshika, who follow the line of thinking that the individual self has eternal existence and is not lost, is not a product of ignorance, is not a product of Maya at a cosmic level and avidya at the individual level. Therefore, pure consciousness has no producer, is what is held by the Brahma Sutras. We have Acharya Sureshwara's Naishkarmya Siddhi, which I often quote. The reflection of consciousness in the internal organ. This is from Naishkarmya Siddhi. For the Vedantins, this is the hard problem. Dr. Munmun, we don't have the hard problem of David Sharma's. David Sharma's hard problem is his own hard problem. But the Vedantins have, Sureshwara sums up the whole scenario. For Vedantins, they don't doubt consciousness, but they doubt the world of objects out there. They don't doubt experience and experiencer, but they may doubt the world and its gross reality. That is what is doubted by them. So therefore, the reflection of consciousness in internal organ gives rise to the notion of I or ego. The ego is, I'm losing them here. I can't read what happened. It puts the mask of I and gets entangled in the world process. As you can now understand, the I or the ego is a product of consciousness and its reflection in the internal organ. The I hasn't got an existence of its own, isn't it? It's a product of ignorance. The I puts the mask and gets entangled in the world process, making claims such as, sthuloham, krushoham, gauroham, iti loka vyavaharha, that is Shankara Bhashya. I'm stout, I'm blind. And the fall of the, individual self or consciousness, which is delimited by the I notion, becomes an object directly to the reflected consciousness, which is Chidabhasa. This is the hard problem for the Vedantins, because this gets repeated in Padmapada, repeated in Sureshwara, repeated in, it seems Professor has joined. So I will rush through my slides, some more slides, and then we will then so then I started discussing between the dichotomy between what is Asmat Pratyaya and Yushmat Pratyaya, the self and the objects. Then I took it up and said the world is real for all practical purposes, for God's sake, and it is ultimately unreal. I quoted, the objective world must be existing. We cannot simply say our mind is creating the world. Generally, it is understood, those who do Shankara Vedanta, or at least those critics of Shankara Vedanta, Ramanuja had successfully branded Shankara as a Mayavadi, which Shankara himself was not aware of. Ramanuja succeeded in branding and succeeded in giving a theory of unreality of the world. And then he made everyone believe that for Shankara, the world is an illusion, the world is a dream, whereas Acharya Shankara was shouting at the height of its voice that, look, I'm not saying that, I'm not on the side of all those. The objective world must be existing. We cannot simply say our mind is creating the world out there, the mountains, the walls, and the trees. If you refer to Brahma Sutra, second Adhyaya, Tarkapada, second Pada, Sutras 28 to 31, we all know the famous Sutra, Vaidharmyachana Swapnadivata. I keep quoting it just to bring home the point that the external world of mountains and trees and pigs and snakes are not mind's creation, for God's sake. In Vedanta, this goes as Vivarana school of philosophy, where Acharya Padmapada had championed this kind of an understanding. Padmapada Acharya's Srishti Drishtivada. You all know Drishti Srishtivada. I don't go with them. The world of mountains and rivers, the pigs and snakes are not our mental creation. There was creation, there was cosmic creation out there, and it has its reality, even if it is not as real as Brahman's reality. Vedantins have only a problem of equating anything with anything as a Sat, because that word Sat is used only for Brahman, that's all. This is the only difficulty they have. Otherwise, all our existence is real. Our jobs are real. Our salary is real, for God's sake. Everything may be Maya, not our salary at least. Every month end, this is the month end, let us not turn everything into Maya, So therefore, I quote there again that, this world is real. It's not a dream, is the position held by Shankara. I've seen many of the young research scholars, those who are listening to me, please, for God's sake, Shankara is contesting Vijnanavada's position of subjective idealism. Supposing it is accepted that our mind is creating things by avidya, operation inside, to agree that the trees in the forest are created by our mind, the cows and the pigs and everything that is moving in the streets, they're all created by you. The mountain, it is abhorring. We just get repelled by this idea. Each one of us, we're repelled by this idea that mind has created all this. We cannot accept this view, and you will be repelled by this very idea. You have to follow the dictum of the Upanishad that creation was affected by a cosmic being. Jagad Vyapara Varjam Prakaranat Asanhi, fourth chapter, fourth adhyaya of the Brahma Sutra. Jagad Vyapara belongs to a cosmic being and not the individual ignorant selves. Jagad Vyapara belongs to the cosmic being. There were the space-time manifestation, the five Mahabhutas. How come? If the man is the last in the series, in the series of the cosmic beings creation, man is the last. You are the last one, Tasmad etasmadva akasha sambhutaha akashad vayu ragnihi agni rapaha apsu prithivyam oshadebhyaha annam annad bhavanti purusha. You are the last one in the series of everything that has been produced. You have not created this world of trees, the pigs and the snakes. We have not created them. The cosmic being is the position held by Padmapada Acharya. The Vivarana school continued it. And you have Vidyaranya upholding on to this position, and then Advaita Siddhi, Madhusudana Acharya holding on to this. As you are aware, this workshop will bring into discussions several, ideas, theorizing, conceptualizing in the present, problematizing in the area of consciousness in the European field. Another wonderful speaker is waiting out there. He will speak on panpsychism. I need not. The theory that the world is composed of atoms of energy, which are all of psychic in nature, that was Leibniz' definition, different from pantheism. I'm not getting into it. You have another speaker. Then you have interface of physics and metaphysics. I'll be waiting to listen to all those physicists. We have excellent physicists lined up. Metaphysical intimations of modern physics, quantum non-locality. Quantum non-locality thesis is well discussed by David Sharp more often than not. Professor Hegelin discusses quantum non-locality thesis. And then epiphenomenalists, starting from the Huxleys and then others, who believed that, it is just plain obvious, all of our, physical events have their impact on the mental events. Rather, the mental events have, their origins in the brain processes, etc. You have so many other theories from the European context. Let's hope to listen to many of them. The Vedanta way, I will not get into this. I'll go through. I discussed the inverted subjectivity thesis from my good teacher Balasubramanian, which I discussed in other occasions as well. And then that's what I said, the hard problem of consciousness. David Sharma's hard problem is not the problem for Vedantins. Vedantins had their own hard problem. Then went into Vedantic reflection, Parisankhyana Paddhati, Upadesha Sahasri. Shloka numbers 112 to 116 discussed dhyana and nididhyasana as a robust methodology. You have lectures on phenomenological approach. We forgot to mention that. The wonderful lectures on the epoche and the reduction mechanism, which you have it in terms of Viveka and Vairagya, which is achieved by Viveka and Vairagya is what is achieved by bracketing methodology in Husserl. And we have none other than Dermot Moran speaking. Yeah, I forgot this name. We have none other than Dermot Moran speaking on this. Is an excellent scholar. Then we have other Panchakosha Vicharas, etc., etc. Thank you very much, Indian Knowledge System Center. Thank you, Professor Ganga Bhushan, my good old friend. And Dr. Munmoon, you're doing a good job. I know it's very hard to organize a one-day seminar. And you have put in, even if it is online for a weekdays, anything. But as you know, we always discuss that, we need to put up with a little bit of difficulty, but then it's good to keep doing something. So I wish success for this workshop. Thank you, the organizers, for this opportunity. I'll be there the whole week along with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this very, very insightful, comprehensive, and brilliant introductory talk. Thank you so much. You have covered so many issues. Starting from the questions like, is there any Indian mind, and what it is to be rooted to be a particular tradition, some very important question that we need to focus on. And at the same time, you have talked about several proofs. Psychological proofs, physiotheological proofs, cosmological proofs, and then I think the most important remarks that you have made, that we cannot talk about the causality of consciousness. We cannot talk about that how, is there any other prior cause for consciousness, because it is a very existence. So it has no prior cause for that. So the very claim about that from homogeneity differences arise and not vice versa. That's a very important point to note. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much once again for this very, very insightful deliberation. It's really nice to hear you after a long time. And of course, I must acknowledge that I have learned so many things from you, and you are very much part of this workshop also. And you have guided us a lot in organizing the theme. You have suggested us some very important names, and so that we got the opportunity. In coming days, we'll get the opportunity to listen them again. So thank you so much, sir, once again, for accepting our invitation and for being with us. Now with this, let us move ahead. We have our second keynote speaker for this evening, and I am very honored to welcome him here in the 7-day workshop, IKS workshop on advances in consciousness studies, Indian and cross-cultural perspectives. Thank you, Professor Sthaneshwar Timalsina, for joining us. And let me take this privilege to introduce him formally. Dr. Sthaneshwar Timalsina is presently holding Nirmal K. and Augustine Matto Endowed Chair in Classical Indic Humanities at Stony Brook University, New York. After completing his master's master degree from Sampurna Ananda Sanskrit University, Dr. Timalsina opened the Department of Tantric Studies in Nepal and taught there for several years before joining Martin Luther University in Halle. Dr. Timalsina completed his PhD in 2005 with a focus on Advaita philosophy. While working on his dissertation, he taught at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and Washington University. He has specialization on Hindu studies, comparative philosophies, and religion. Since 2005, he has been teaching in both the Department for the Study of Religions and Department of Philosophy at San Diego State University. In his writings and thought, Dr. Timalsina webs his classical training with his philosophical training in his own unique style of comparative and analytical studies. He published his dissertation in 2006 under the title Seeing and Appearance, A History of Advaita Doctrine of Drishti Srishti. He expanded his research into the area of consciousness studies, resulting in the book Consciousness in Indian Philosophy, published by Routledge. He then shifted his attention to tantric studies and published 2 books on language and language of images, meaning and visualization in tantras, and tantric visual culture, a cognitive approach, from Routledge. In addition to these books, he has published more than 80 articles in the areas of Hindu philosophy, tantric studies, yoga studies, and comparative philosophy. He writes in both Sanskrit and English. His Sanskrit works reflecting classical mystic philosophers such as Avinavagupta. His works, Tantra, draws upon the esoteric tradition of Tripura and synthesis Shakta philosophy, whereas the short of treatise captures essential Kola and Karma Tantrism. In order to disseminate philosophical knowledge distilled from various Hindu schools of thought, Professor launched the Vimarsha Foundation in 2009, and since then he has continued to offer regular full courses through this forum. Professor envisions Vimarshas as a global school gurukul for learning classical Sanskrit-based philosophical system and mystical tradition. That's really nice. And today, he is making a presentation. He's making a presentation on consciousness is like fire, panpsychism, and Purushavada. I welcome you, sir, once again, and I thank you for accepting our invitation. And now it's over to you, sir.
Sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Please unmute. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for inviting me, all the distinguished scholars. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. I will go very briefly today because most of what I have to say is one in the Purushavada paper has been published in Journal of Indian Philosophy, and another, Consciousness is Like Fire, is a paper being reviewed now, and hopefully within a month, 2 months, it will be released, and I'll share with Moon, and anybody interested can read. So I'll reserve my comments or reflections within the scope of what I have already researched, rather than bringing a new research in front of you, which I should have done, but I'm in transition to moving from one space to the next. Thinking about consciousness, it's so amazing that we hear so many different ideas today, and consciousness has gained popularity and not notoriety in the last 2 decades or so. Before, consciousness was not viewed as much of a serious topic for consideration, and most of the physicalists maintained that everything about human nature, everything about consciousness will be explained within a decade, and we'll have to, I guess, wait for a long time to have that reductionist explanation of consciousness, or hopefully never, because I do not believe that explaining our neurological states will suffice to explain our experience, or the conscious event. Talking about consciousness also has two different strands of thoughts coming together. One is what is happening in the Western conversation and how we working in Indian philosophy can contribute to this global discourse on consciousness. For multiple reasons. Number one, Indian philosophy has been hardly even in a footnote for mostly the philosophical discourse in the West. And if we did not have sufficient materials, that would be okay. But in spite of so much of writing and literature and so many dozens of philosophers contributing to consciousness studies for the millennia, we still lack in having a complete engagement with in the global scale. And I think that that is the main project necessary for us to involve right now. And the second thing is consciousness is a universal topic. It does not involve necessarily any nation state or any particular culture, and not even humans, because consciousness is to explain consciousness is to explain the core of our being. Having said that, we have seen multiple extremes. I myself worked for a good time on one of the extremes on Drishti Srishti Vada. The professor right before me said that he will take the route of Srishti Drishti and explain the phenomenal Vyavahara Satya as a Satya, which is great. But let's entertain Drishti Srishti, because Madhusudana Saraswati or many other Advaitins declare that Drishti Srishti is the primary Advaita Mukhyaha Vedanta Siddhanta. That's the primary Advaita doctrine. Or go to Yogacara or many other philosophies, whether Madhyamaka. I believe that when we try to explain consciousness by reducing materiality, we are not explaining the phenomenal. And when the other approach of physical reductionism is to reduce consciousness to matter, is not really explaining consciousness. It's simply evading the issue of consciousness by reducing consciousness to simple material states. I am more and more convinced that we need to explore for the philosophical positions that stemmed globally, and if we are looking for Indian materials, maybe in the writings of Ramanuja or in the writings of Abhinavagupta or in some other writings that we have not paid as much attention as in the philosophy of Shankara, for example, where we might find a sort of a harmony to explain the world without reducing to consciousness, or to explain consciousness without reducing to materiality. And for that matter, I found that maybe we can entertain to some extent the idea of panpsychism or cosmopsychism. But that doesn't mean that I'm convinced with any of these ideas either. Ultimately, I believe that the doctrine of avivakti, emergence, or manifestation in whatever the form we explain, does have the potential to explain consciousness in much better platform than most of these emerging theories. And for this, I have traced in the published article, the literature that Mallavadin, a prominent Jaina philosopher from 6th century or so, addresses, in which he's simply trying to critique the Advaita philosophy, but what he critiques is a doctrine he calls Purushavada. And in this Purushavada, he cites, as if if you read the passages, it appears that he's directly citing from the Purusha Sukta, and the expositions go beyond Purusha Sukta looking passages to Vakyapadiya Vritti of Bhartrihari and similar texts, some of which I'm afraid are lost today. But when I kept working further, I found that the conversation of Janaka and Sulabha has some nuance to it to add. I borrowed the metaphor for the title, Consciousness is like Fire, from this very conversation of Janaka and Sulabha. This Sulabha, easy to access, is a hermit who intrudes the Senate of King Janaka. It's the story in Mahabharata. Most of us do know that by heart. And in this, he brings a perspective. That perspective is the way the fire burns. I'm taking this metaphor rather seriously. There are 3 or 4 metaphors that she gives to explain consciousness. I would like to first talk about that and then see whether this is panpsychism or physical reductionism or whatever the way we can explain. The first example is of fire and the fire log. So when we have friction, the fire log ignites and we have the fire. But was there fire before ignition? No, there was no fire. But can you decisively say there was no fire and then the fire comes out of nowhere? No, all that is required for the energy was already there in the latent form. And that is just manifest in the specific form of fire when we ignite. So the fire logs and the fire are not 2 diametrically opposite entities. And it's not that you can just have the friction of anything and then have the fire. But this fire log is giving us the possibility, the power intrinsically embedded within the materiality. So if my conscious state is something akin to the ignition of the fire log, having fire, then this body, my physicality, is not some type of a diametrical opposite to having the state of consciousness. But if this consciousness and our physicality are not to be viewed as 2 different entities, but a continuum, then what we have is the conscious states can manifest and can remain unmanifest. And for that matter, again, I will give you the examples from the Dvadasaranaya Chakra of Mallavadin, where he goes to describe state consciousness, avastha. And this state consciousness or avastha is essential to Gaudapada's analysis of the Mandukya. And in this, we have the waking state of consciousness, sleeping state, dreaming state, and then the 4th or the transcendent Turiya state of consciousness. So what he explains is not that we as conscious subjects have 4 different states of consciousness, but what he maps is these 4 states explain the totality, that maybe animals are in some type of dream states, maybe plants are in some deep sleep states, and then it goes beyond that. The conscious states, nothing exists in the world that is bereft of having that consciousness, but consciousness is such that it can manifest or it can remain unmanifest. So this approach of consciousness is stoked in everything that exists, can still have a sort of a duality, that there is this consciousness soaking something that is not consciousness. Materiality is something other than consciousness. But if let's read the Purusha Sutta, Purusha eva idagu sarvam, jatkincha jagat tyan jagat. So this what is Purusha? Purusha eva chaitanyam. So then in the references that I'm referring, citing from Dvadasaranaya Chakra or the Mallavadins and other texts similar to that, like Bhakyapadiya Vritti, that is where we find that Purusha is Chaitanya, or consciousness is Purusha, identity there. So in this type of identity, we are getting to the original philosophy of the Hindus, going all the way back to Rig Veda and continuing to explain the world not as opposite to the absolute, but rather an extension or expression of the absolute, that the text goes to explain that just like the sasya, the rice comes or the grass come in the season and they go back to the seed, the same way conscious states manifest and they go back. So what is materiality? there is other metaphor there. The materiality is like the state of turning into ice or vaporization. The water element can be found in different states. So we have the solid and the vapor states, and also fluid state of water. The same way, what we call consciousness is something subtle, and when we call the matter is in this gross tangible form, but that doesn't mean that they are diametrically opposite. So in this regard, I'm thinking that maybe panpsychism can address some of the our philosophies in more relevant terminology. But even within panpsychism, they have not gotten away of this dichotomy that everything has this psychic or mind-like nature. Everything has, meaning everything is endowed with. It's not that everything is. And that is where we have to be careful, that whether panpsychism is yet another form of a dualistic philosophy. And the next point I would say is, for many panpsychists are boiled into this adopting an idea of micro-subjectivity, like Nagel also tries to argue through, and there are a bunch of philosophers in that line who advocate for or try to defend some form of micro-subjectivity. What do they mean by micro-subjectivity? Is our conscious subjective state is an emergent structure of a collection of different subjectivities in the cellular level, or every neuron has its own subjective state. And when I say I am Sthaneshwar, I'm referring to this collective state of all the micro subjectivities. The problem I notice in this idea is I never feel my subjectivity as an assemblage. I never experience myself as a collective of different pieces. Or when I think of myself, I do not think myself as a collection, a heap. But this singularity of self-consciousness is not just unique to me, my subjectivity, but is unique to every single animal. That the subjective experience is singular and unique and not copyable. We cannot copy the subjective state and not transferable. And so this uniqueness of subjectivity, to argue that it's a product of the collectivity of micro-subjective states, takes a big leap of faith, yet again, of the unexplained phenomena of what does it look like? What is it like to have the micro-subjective state? Or what is it like my singular neuron feels as pain or pleasure? And then is that sensation that is registered in the brain is actually pain or pleasure? Is this simple vibration, pulsation of my neurological state, is it to be interpreted as the experience of pain or pleasure? And of course, I'm differing to that these neurological states, if we reduce these physical states to conscious states, we are still, like David Chalmers has already presented, that there is no addressing of the qualia, what it is like to have the conscious state. And if we are trying to engage this phenomenal, the internal, what it is like of consciousness in the conversation of consciousness, even this microsubjectivity model will not help us explain, and even those other dualistic models and the reductionist model of physicalism will not help explain the conscious state. Now, what it is like for us to rethink then Philip Goff has come up with yet another thesis of cosmopsychism, that there is this collective psychic state, and our micro state is actually my physical state or my mental state. That, let's consider that a micro state of subjectivity, and then there's just a collective consciousness, a singular state of consciousness. I find that more agreeable rather than trying to explain consciousness from the molecular state, I am finding easier to explain it from singularity to our diversification, particularly because many of the classical Advaita texts also explain consciousness from singularity. And if we go to, as mentioned, Srishti Drishti and Ishwara's creation, what is Ishwara? Ishwara is collective consciousness, samashti sarira abhimani of the sushupti. That is what Ishwara is. So basically, the singular subjectivity that collectively experiences all our subjectivities within. So this singular subjectivity is Ishwara, and that imagines, that's like basically in some other texts we find as a projection of Hiranyagarbha, and whether you call Ishwara or Hiranyagarbha, there are subtle differences within the categorization of the states of consciousness in Advaita Vedanta, but overall what we find is the collective breaking down into or splitting into multiple subjectivities. This fragmentation, I'm explaining in terms of Abhivyakti. This Abhivyakti I have also addressed earlier in the conferences, that Abhivyakti, the terminology starts coming all the way from the Mahabharata, but comes to prominence in the writings of Bhartrihari and goes all the way to you read Shiva Drishti of Somananda and the works of Abhinavagupta. What is Abhivyakti? It is coming into blossoming. So you buy a stick of rose for the rose flower and then put it to ground. And then when the season comes, you have the new stem and then the blossoming comes and the fragrance comes. So if this little stick of rose did not have the potential to come to blossoming when the season comes, you would not be purchasing or putting your labor to plant that stick in the hope of once seeing the blossoming. Everything in the world, all the materiality has the potential the same way of self-luminosity. How to define consciousness? Its self-awareness is the defining characteristic of consciousness, that consciousness does not require anything else to explain. So we can call this an interiority. What it is like for matter to be matter. This interiority as consciousness, because everything we can do from the physicalist perspective is explaining from its exteriority, what it is like, how does it behave, what is its external attributes, but what it is like within itself, then we can propose that the interiority as it is, as such of the state of being, whether that state of being is in the state of materiality or in the state of consciousness, we can say that that interiority is constituted by consciousness. And this will help us explain that this fragmentation is what we will call Maya or Avidya. And then there is no objection to explaining from the Advaita perspective either. Rather than trying to use Advaita's Maya or Avidya to explain after fragmentation, to explain the world or to explain Brahman, I believe I'm proposing that we can help explain this fragmentation as a process. Maya is just like covering, avidya, knowing, and in its individuation as the very mechanism of avidya, that we fail to recognize this singularity. And this failing to recognize singularity and giving rise to differentiated modes of subjectivity helps us explain also the epistemic states of how we have the experience of a particular object. Let me say, seeing something in front of me, a pen, a paper, my laptop. So how do I explain this? In this recognizing a singular entity, as long as my focus, my conscious mode is not dedicated to only one object, I would not have this distinction made and a recognition of this is my laptop. But when I am conscious, this is my laptop, what is happening to me is I am as if blocking all the other possible modes. Maybe I'm feeling pain right now, but I am blocking that sensation. Maybe I'm seeing in front of me many other things, the lamp and the pen and the papers and a bunch of things. I am not conscious of it. I have channeled all my consciousness to a singular object. So there is not just a recognition of one entity, there is a gradual suspension of all the other objects given within the scope of consciousness, and only when all the other modes are blocked or suspended, I am given to a singular mode of consciousness. Then there arises, this is this object. There arises my subjectivity too, because when I am conscious of myself is when I suspend all other modes or all other external objects of consciousness, then my subjective state emerges within me. This is me. So this is why this avidya maya doesn't need to be explained as giving something illusory, but as a process of suspending all the other objects or all other possible instances of consciousness so that a particular mode of consciousness can emerge. Because without that suspension, we could never have had a singular object identification. So what we are doing is explaining how the conscious state emerges of like, this is my laptop. And we are saying that there are like 1 billion neurons triggering, and then there are these multiple pictures of the same laptop, and they are making an assemblage, and that is giving us a singularity. And that is how the mind is interpreting of the millions of pictures. That is good. But when I'm conscious of my surrounding, there's always, like Merleau-Ponty talks at one point about like seeing a house. And that's a very good example that when I see a house, I do not see just the house. I also see the background as if like in a canvas. So there is always the surrounding, that the trees or the mountain or whatever other houses in the background. And then when I recognize, I have this recognition of a singularity, this is the house. And there is a gradual suspension of the other modes of consciousness in this identification. And I believe that we can use the theory of avidya maya to explain this process of differentiation rather than how the assemblage is made or how the suspension is made of consciousness, and how to explain our conscious state or being in the world. Why am I proposing that these, rather than the mainstream philosophies, these side philosophies might be more useful? Why can't I just do Nyaya? Most of, like B.K. Matilalji and Mohanty, most of the eminent philosophers who have come to the West, they have used Nyaya as an example of how we have rationality. And how the advanced state of rational thinking has evolved in classical India. And that's a good project. Number one, a lot has already been said. And number two, I do not believe that the Nyaya interpretation of consciousness is to add any further nuance to what has already been said. And in the field of consciousness, you can read Kishore Kumar Chakravarti, for example. He has also a book on mind. And likewise, Jonathan Ganeri has written on naturalization of philosophy from the Indian perspective. So you can read some of these works. So between these two extremes, one is a pure Yogacara Sautrantika type way of explaining consciousness by going to some form of subjectivity and subjective illusionism, or going to Drishti Srishti or similar type of philosophy that do not help us explain much about the world and my interrelationship to the world. Even if we do not reject the phenomenality, but the goal has been always about explaining the singularity of consciousness. As a philosopher, we need to have our grounding, our foot on what is immediately given. And what is immediately given is my own physicality. I'm an embodied being, and I feel pain and pleasure. And if my embodiment and if my pain and pleasure are denied in this self-givenness of my singularity, is my solipsistic mode of the self-givenness of consciousness, then we are not actually helping advanced philosophy to have any meaningful dialogue with our physicist friends, for example, or to relate to the real world that has so much to do with our being in the world, our design. So this philosophy that we are working to advance should not run away from our being in the world to our design. And for that, I find that some of these alternative ideas, and they are not as alternative as we might think, because I do believe that actually prior to Shankaracharya, the mode of Upanishadic writing was dominantly following this type of singular, or you can say monistic philosophy. And we can actually work further to rediscover. And for all those working in history of philosophy, this gives an amazing project. And for those who are trying to get away from any type of illusionism or subjectivism, this gives yet another project. And it also helps us be relevant in the global conversation on philosophy and consciousness studies without reducing either to physicalism or to subjectivity. And I would like to stop at that point. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I'm always here, Mahmoud. You have my full support. And in every account, I'm proud to be part of it. And I am so honored that such distinguished philosophers from India are engaged and trying to bring these classical insights to discourse with global philosophies. And I believe we have a very bright future, and we will have more engaged philosophical conversations in the future. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Professor Timalsina, for this very, very insightful, excellent, and charming presentation. I mean, it was